guys for joining. We're really excited to talk to you. I did want to make a couple things clear. This is one of our most popular webinars because it has covered DSS in the past, but as you all very well know, DSS is sunsetting and is going to be replaced by Luminate. So as we move forward, we're going to be changing the title of this to say Luminate Recipes, since Luminate doesn't really live on Retail Link, it's its own portal. So be sure to stick around for that webinar. We're just going to continually update this webinar as we get more content. But know today is probably going to be more 80% Luminate and 20% DSS, but we can kind of answer questions to both, since we know suppliers are still using Luminate, but they're also still using DSS until it is sunset on March 1st. So with that, we'll get into today's content. My name is Allie Truong. I will be hosting today's webinar, so I'll be in the chat answering questions, and covering content today is the wonderful Peter Spaulding. Peter has done a lot of research on Luminate and how it is changing from DSS, so he is the perfect person to go through this content today, and I'm excited to learn some stuff from him. All right, we have a packed schedule, so we're going to talk a little bit about the history of DSS and why it's going away, just kind of giving you the updates if this is new to you. At this point, it shouldn't be, but as you know, there's lots of information flying at you, so we want to make sure that we cover all the bases. And then we're going to cover Luminate and Basic, Luminate Basic and Charter, just kind of give you the differences of those. I know some people are still trying to decide if Charter is worth it. Something that I think Peter will call out that we have heard from several suppliers talking to the Luminate team is that if you do not have Luminate Charter by March 1st, the price is going to go up more than it is already. So we want to call that out and just prepare suppliers best we can with that change coming up. And then we'll get into the best tips and strategies. Again, Luminate is so new. We want to facilitate learning together and make sure that we all understand what's going on. So we'll cover that, and feel free to share what you've learned in the chat as well. Last, we will end with Q&A with Peter and I, and we'll kind of get into how we do questions here on our webinars. So first things first, the FAQ that we get asked the most is, will you get a copy of today's slide deck? Yes. We always, in any webinar, will send you the slide deck in a PDF format, and we will send a recording to your inbox in about 3 to 4 business days. If you ever are unable to find the email that we send you, or aren't able to sign up for a webinar and won't get our emails, then you can go and find each webinar on our website. We have the slide deck. It's listed as a resource, and that's in PDF format for you to download, as well as a recording that lives on our website or our YouTube page, so you can check those out. And then what's the best way to ask a question? So the first thing that I will be looking at is the Q&A tab. That is the 2 speech bubbles on Zoom. That's the easiest way for me to see a question. And you can use the chat to ask a question as well. However, just with the amount of questions that we are anticipating and the conversation that will be going on in the chat, it's easy for things to get lost. So I will be prioritizing those questions that are in the Q&A. Last thing I'll say on questions is send them in early. I may kind of interject as Peter's going through the content if there's a question that is pertinent. But for the most part, since we have 15 minutes at the end for questions, I'll save those for Peter review all at once. All right, and then last thing, if this is your first webinar, we want to introduce ourselves. We are a part of SupplyPike. We create cloud-based tools that help CPGs reduce revenue loss. We do that in a couple different ways at a couple different retailers. Really, we cover at Walmart deductions, your AP deductions, OTIF, SQEP, overages. We have a lot of products built out for Walmart. We also have products at Target, for Kroger suppliers, for Amazon suppliers, and we're working on some exciting things in the future. The other thing that I'll say here is that we're trusted by CPGs across the box, and have helped save and recover a lot of dollars in those different buckets of revenue loss. So with that, Peter, I'm going to hand it over to you to get into today's content.
Okay, thanks, Allie. That was a great introduction. Allie said that I've done a lot of research on Luminate, and I think that that's true to a certain extent, but there's no real replacement for boots on the ground experience. So what I'm mostly excited about today is for us to have a conversation together about, what has been what has been your experience so far with this whole process. How are you feeling about DSS going away? If you've used Illuminate already, if it's something that you guys are already kind of transitioning to, what has that experience been? Because I feel like we can all learn best together. And there's also a couple of questions in the Q&A that I wanted to start with because they're really great questions and they're very great introductory questions to both this webinar and to this subject kind of generally. One question was about Supply Pike, if we're affiliated in any way with Walmart. And we are not. We do not speak on Walmart's behalf by any means. What we do is we try to engage with supplier-facing information and to create a community for suppliers to learn from each other. So that's what's going on here. We're not in any way an official Luminate training session or DSS training session. There's no replacement for the real thing in those platforms themselves. So I wanted to call that out first of all. This is an open conversation that we want to have together, but just kind of as suppliers about Walmart. And then we had another question that is a great introduction to the conversation about Luminate as well that I wanted to call out. That is there any way to transfer existing reports from DSS to Luminate? So my understanding is that there's not, and that the reports that are being pulled in DSS have to be basically duplicated or translated in a way to Luminate's new kind of structure. I'm not sure if there's a kind of hidden benefit to doing charter, if you could do something like that, but I haven't heard anything about that. But let us know in the chat if you have. Is there any quick way to translate those reports in DSS to Luminate? My understanding is that you can't. We also had some questions sent in early on this subject as well, asking about what is the equivalent of a specific report in DSS in Luminate. And for the most part, a lot of that information or a lot of that work is also going to have to be done kind of in DSS, making sure that you understand the specifics of the report that's being pulled there, and then poking around in Luminate and trying to kind of create an equivalent. But there are some aliases, which we'll be talking about a little bit towards the end as well. Allie, do we have another kind of pertinent question here at the beginning or comment?
I just wanted to add a comment to the question about transferring reports onto Luminate. What I have understood from the suppliers that I've talked to and reading some of the documentation from Luminate is that the best way, if you want something to be like for like, is to pull up your DSS reports or download them, have some kind of reference, and then just learn how to pull them in Luminate. And doing that now while you still have access to DSS instead of just, a report that you've downloaded. So that would be my one call out.
Yeah, that's a great call out. There's this tiny window of opportunity where we have you can go into both, and both are kind of operational. Walmart has said that they prefer Luminate reports already, but at the same time, Walmart has admitted that Luminate isn't entirely built out yet either, and might not be entirely built out until later on in this calendar year. So, but we'll get to all that here in a little bit. We're going to cover kind of the basics of decision support and what it going away means too before getting into some of the other stuff, but definitely keep those questions coming. We're going to get into the more granular stuff with this as well. And the reason why we're doing this webinar now and why we're doing a few of them also now before March is just that there is this golden window of opportunity where we can look at both and we can compare both before, access to DSS goes away. So as many of you know, this is basically your kind of report pulling tool in Retail Link. And it's basically a kind of a sales performance thing, even though it does quite a bit more than that as well. So queries are created using report templates, as you know, and these report templates have specific names in DSS. Some of which are the same in Luminate and some of which have kind of a different name. So watch out for that as well. But yeah, basically there's a lot of key metrics like GMROI, sales in stores, on hand percentage, and things like that that decision support is used to track, to pull those reports, to keep your finger on the pulse of your in-store performance. And I keep using the term in-store. You can use DSS for e-com.com sales as well. But a big part of the push, or at least Walmart's explanation for why they've pushed to Luminate in recent years, is to create a kind of single source of truth, omni-channel look at sales across the whole spectrum. So when Walmart says that Luminate is going to be more accurate than DSS in these months, I think that's really what they're talking about, is that Luminate is allegedly going to do a better job of looking at omni-channel performance as well as in-store performance, all kind of together in the same space. But yes, that change will create a lot of kind of hiccups for people who are pulling these reports regularly in DSS. Change is hard. And then there's a little tip here about how to bookmark DSS and Retail Link. You don't need to know this for DSS anymore, but it applies to all of the apps in Retail Link. If you're not familiar with this already, you can just find the apps and star them. And then, if you have like 5 that you're using pretty regularly, and I believe that that'll be kind of across the whole business, any of the Retail Link users will have the same ones. So you have to kind of share that feature with other users. Covered this a little bit already as well. March 1st is when it's going away, is when it's being discontinued. And it will be replaced with Luminate. And there's 2 options. We're going to dive into the differences between these here in a little bit as well. Luminate is required on some level, whether it's basic or charter. Charter is the idea behind charter is to give suppliers more insight into basically kind of the user experience with purchasing in store and online. So you're going to get a lot more kind of buyer feedback from the actual customers, Walmart customers, and then there should be kind of better insight into some things as well. But again, we're going to look from a high level at what the differences between basic and charter are. But we know that Walmart is doing a concerted effort to reach out to suppliers, basically to try to sell charter to them. And in those meetings, there's a lot more kind of detailed information about what those benefits are, obviously, because that's where the selling point is. So again, we're not speaking for Walmart on their behalf. The stuff that we've included in this webinar about the difference between charter and basic is stuff that is outward facing and public. Your kind of particular interactions with Walmart on that particular subject are obviously going to be kind of the real determining factor in whether that's a good like business decision or not, right? But I do have a question for everyone, and since we have there's obviously a lot of interest in Luminate and a lot of kind of conversations that have been happening in the supplier kind of community around this subject. Let us know in the chat. Have you started using Luminate yet? Or is this something that you guys have been pushing off? Is this something that you're dreading? If you have used it, what has that experience been like so far? Let us know in the chat, and just to kind of get that conversation going there would be great for all of us to kind of start that too. So Luminate, this is a Walmart definition. But again, it's including a lot of some of the things that we've been talking about already. So it is they're defining it really as a suite of analytic tools that deliver actionable customer-centric insights to drive better business decisions at Walmart. And already there, what you're seeing is the pull of charter, right? Basic is for the most part a replacement for DSS, but charter is kind of supposed to be giving more insight into that. Those customer-centric insights. That's what's really kind of going on there. And then in general, Walmart is their vision for Luminate is that it will be helping with new product launches and line extensions, package redesigns, seasonal promotions, distribution, and/or modular changes that also account for pickup and delivery. So that's a lot. There's a lot that's going on there, and there's some kind of very open-ended language, and there's some very specific language. But again, we also know that the main thing that we're going to be talking about here is pulling reports. what that looks like, and supplier performance kind of um, insight here too. Allie, do we have another question?
We just to your question from the last slide, the conversation
Mm.
starter. Most people in here that I'm seeing are saying that they have had limited use, they're starting, dreading, they haven't started, they're, poking around, trying to learn a little bit, but it's not intuitive. It's not the same as DSS. Um, just a couple of people saying that they do use it. It's not intuitive. Lots of dragging feet. I'm just scrolling through these. Two things I wanted to call out. One of Chris made a comment about you started using it to compare DSS data to Luminate and noticed that there are discrepancies. Can you speak to, what we've heard Walmart say about this and how we've kind of helped other suppliers with this issue?
Yeah. So you may be referring to the aliases. This is something that we've been kind of talking about a lot. There's different language that's used for the same reports, basically, in Luminate and in DSS. And there's different language used for different filter options in Luminate as well as with DSS. So what that will look like really is that um, at least in terms of filtering options, the terms that DSS had for those filters will be still searchable in Luminate. So this is a really important thing, and we'll be talking about this a little bit more later. So I'll remind you later, but um, the actual filters themselves may have different names in Luminate, but you can still search for them with their old DSS alias as of now. Um, and there's a special glossary that lives in Luminate for talking about the differences between these business elements is what is their terminology there. And we'll get to that later on. That'll be the last slide, I think, of this presentation. But that's going to be a huge help for you individually working on kind of transitioning to Luminate and rebuilding all of these reports that you've been kind of running for so long. They do exist. Some of them will have a different name. Is kind of what I would say. And again, we can kind of learn from each other, hopefully, with all of that.
And I did want to say, Peter, thank you for mentioning the aliases because that's a big part. And I think that is what's helpful for kind of translating the DSS language to Luminate. Alex also called this out in the chat, and this is what I was thinking of. If there are discrepancies between Luminate and DSS, prioritize Luminate. Send the Luminate report to your vendor team or to your Walmart partners that you're working with. Walmart has said specifically that they are looking at Luminate. And there are some fields in DSS that they're just going to be calculating differently in Luminate. So I would not spend any time teasing between the columns in Luminate and DSS. Just use the Luminate report. And if it makes you feel better, pull both reports for now. And, if anyone's communicating to you and asking you why it's different, that is, you can find documentation where Walmart has said it's going to be different. Trust Luminate. So that's what I would say. We've got a lot of comments in here. I'm gonna probably just go off so you can get through the content, but I'll bring some of these up later in our conversation, Peter.
Yes, great. We love to see that, and I really appreciate the engagement and participation with it because I feel like that's really kind of the core of what's going on here too, even if it's commiseration at times too. But yeah, it's a great call out. Walmart has said openly that what they really want is just the Luminate data, even though Luminate is not as fully built out as DSS was. But yeah, that's the Luminate data is supposed to be more accurate. So yes, DSS will still, even if it isn't as accurate as Luminate, it is still apparently a viable option. Now that may be that may change from buyer to buyer. Maybe some buyers are more kind of aligned with Luminate and they're preferring that from their suppliers right now is Luminate-based reporting. But it seems like most people are still just using DSS as of now. So it is still kind of working. It is still functional, and it will be until March. And then it may be helpful. This is kind of more to what Ali was just saying, to compare the DSS data against the Luminate data. So there's terminology differences, but there's data differences as well. And moving forward, the Luminate data is going to be kind of more valuable. So again, I don't want to sound too kind of like doom and gloom-ish about this, but this could be another really good kind of motivator for getting into Luminate and trying to pull those reports just to see kind of like what are the numbers going to be? How what is it that Luminate is pulling data wise that DSS couldn't or wasn't, that is going to change Walmart's kind of perspective on our business. So again, yeah, I don't want to be kind of doom and gloomy, but there's just to give a kind of another sort of motivator for getting in there. So we're going to look at some examples of templates, and this is all still from DSS. So take all this with a grain of salt. Most of you are probably veterans of this already, so we can kind of move through this section pretty quickly. This is just basics of report building. And as Allie mentioned at the beginning, as Walmart is transitioning over to Luminate, this webinar and our educational content generally will be transitioning over from pulling reports in DSS to pulling reports in Luminate. What that looks like, and different kinds of like best practices and tips for doing all of that. So this is the homepage, as probably a lot of you know. And there are the templates and the template names. And again, these are a lot of these will have the same alias, the same name, business element in Illuminate. But where they don't, you're going to want to check the glossary to see where those differences are, because the reports themselves are going to be kind of challenging, I think, to duplicate. So yes, and another kind of call out, I don't think that I've called this out enough yet so far in this webinar, but if you haven't watched the Luminate basic training, it is available on Luminate. It's about 2.5 hours long. It's pretty long, but it will go through some of your most important reports, how to pull them, and it'll go through a lot more of the specifics of what we're going to talk about in this section in Luminate as well. Do we have another question on this?
I just wanted to call out just some of the comments that were made about this. I'm trying to sort through them. I had it just a second ago. Someone mentioned that they work with different buyers and they're still asking for DSS. So I know that this is mostly Luminate and we will go through this pretty quickly, but we are having suppliers that we're working with and suppliers that are commenting here in the chat that even buyer teams, replenishment teams are still asking for DSS reports. So we do want to be diligent and still cover this for you guys, but we'll get to that Luminate content really soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's good to know too, just that as we know with all things kind of Walmart related, a lot of the business will vary from buyer to buyer. And what's likely is that for buyers that transition over to Luminate will be somewhat difficult as well as it is for suppliers. So yes. But here in these sections, users are basically drilling down to based off of a bunch of different varieties. But here we've kind of called out report type or specific country, and that you would like to create. So creating a DSS report query is relatively easy using what are called these report templates. But they can also be customized a little bit as well, according to time and according to other sort of filters or data that you want to pull. But the templates are there basically as a guide to kind of what it is that Walmart is specifically looking for in your kind of reporting as well. You don't have to kind of start over from square one with each of these as well. You don't need to have any database experience either in order to create some really kind of useful queries and really insightful DSS report templates. And these can be really helpful. Obviously, we're talking about this all in terms of the context of basically the performance with Walmart, how to communicate these things to Walmart. But it's really helpful from a business internal perspective as well. How's our Walmart business doing? They're all going to be using all this data as well. Okay, So there's a bunch of folders, and in each of these folders, there's a bunch of more specific kind of report names or report templates as well. So here we have sales and margin is the first one, and that is obviously what that obviously communicates to us is that DSS, its main function or one of its main functions we have to acknowledge is supplier performance in terms of sales and stores and e-com, right? And hopefully with Luminate, that will kind of become more omni-channel, or at least it'll hopefully be more insightful across all of those different areas. But you've got a lot of really kind of specific filters that you can dive into with each of these report templates, whether that's based on store traded stores or certain kind of trading, store detail, like on an individual store level or in a region. And again, all the way that these reports are pulled and the importance of these reports will vary a lot depending on the size of the supplier too. Yeah, it may seem very overwhelming, but you know, the amount of time that you can or that you are allowed to dedicate to this, it all just kind of really pays itself off in the long run. But yeah, those are some of the templates that you can see under the sales and margin header. So basically, this is one way to think about what these queries and reports are kind of designed to do and how to build them. Excuse me, how to think about the process of the report from the beginning to completion. You can start by forming a specific question, right? And again, this is just one way of doing this. You can't just let the templates kind of teach you about what sort of questions you should be asking too. But one way, especially once you get a little bit more comfortable with the app and with the concept, starting with a very specific question, like what are the sales for my items by store by item for the last 13 weeks, will be easy to kind of filter down to or really drill down into. So I want to see what these items are, what the stores are, sales by item per store over the last 13 weeks. So then what you could do is if you're going from a question-based way of running these running reports, then you have to find the template that is best for drilling down into that information. So there's several dozen different report templates available that will help you answer almost any of your business questions. And that's a good thing, and it's also a bad thing. It creates it can create a little bit of analysis paralysis whenever you're going from phase 1 to 2 in this process of, I don't even know where to start. Yeah, should I be starting with the supplier report card or scorecard, or what am I really kind of looking for here? What's the template that will be the most kind of efficient for drilling down to the specific business question? So again, you can start with a question, or you can start with a template and use the templates to kind of as a way of sort of learning what sort of questions you could ask, right? But then you have to complete the report template. And so the way that you do this is basically you're taking a template that is closest to giving you the kind of information that you need in the business question, and then reducing that or filtering the data in that down to be an exact match with the business question that you started out with. So the templates are divided up into a number of tabs dependent on what data you're needing, right? So the process to build any DSS report query is the same in terms of that. But depending on how specific you want to go, depending on how or where you want to drill down by region or by store or by omnichannel or just by e-com or .com, whatever it is that you're really looking for. If you really want, or your boss is asking for you to report on a period of 3 months in a certain region, right? It depends on what the kind of need is, obviously from business to business. But that's where the last phase of that report completing process is really important for drilling down into specifics. Okay. So report columns. This is a whole tab called the columns tab. All the sections that you make on all the selections that you make on this tab will be represented as columns of data in the resulting Excel report, right? So this is what I'm talking a little bit about with filtering the data, right? In some ways, you can think of it as as you need to put limitations on the amount of data so that you're not overwhelmed with the number of columns or with the number of rows or whatever it is that you're reporting on. But you can also think of it as adding insight. So you're adding different data points that you want to be able to align over a period of time or whatever it is, right? So under the columns tab, you can basically select as many of these as you want. There's so many, there are dozens of report columns available to choose from. So again, I'm not sure who has the luxury for like exploration in this process, right? I'm talking about Luminate as kind of like going in and exploring. But of course, everyone's strapped for time and resources. But really, I think that the more it can be approached from a position of exploration, the better. But yes, all of you have pulled reports in one way or another, even if you think that you haven't. If you think that you're a new supplier and you've never done anything like this before, you've looked at an Excel sheet full of data before, and you've had to kind of do in your own mind or in practice before filtering out certain bits of information in order to be able to make certain data points align. It is an intuitive process, even if the apps are not always intuitive. Allie, do we have another question?
Hey, Peter, I'm just giving us a time check. I know we have a lot of Luminate content, so maybe let's skip to that and get into some of that because most of the questions are asking about that at this point.
Sure. Yes. So real quickly, we've got some, just like with the columns tab, this is just a more granular way of filtering down as well. We'll get to the 6-digit and 9-digit difference as well. And I've been talking a lot about filtering by location too. That's pretty intuitive. You can look at warehouses, traits, stores, any number of different ways of kind of narrowing that down, store groups. And then, of course, time. Time is super important for the whole process, right? If you want to look at your year or your year over year as well. And then there's a process of submission to actually run the report, download an Excel sheet. And then you've got status. You have to wait for the report to build. And you can look at those that are building or that have already been built in the done download icon. And we're listing out a couple of just really common DSS report templates. A lot of these, again, have Luminate equivalents or aliases. So the company summary report, you can come back and look at this slide later on if you want to learn more about that, if you're not familiar. Here are the report columns that are available in there. Obviously, the vendor number and the time range is obviously, again, going to be by, you can do by fuzzy dates or fiscal year to date as well. Okay, and that's just one example. We've got an article. I would love if Allie, if you could share in the chat the article that we recently published on the vendor scorecard in Luminate. It's the first one that we've really kind of covered how to do in Luminate, but it might be a really helpful resource for you or for your team or for other people in your business, just as a way of getting started in Luminate, you know, ripping off the Band-Aid and fully committing to trying it out. Let that article be inspiration to you for getting in there and pulling the scorecard. Okay, so this is, again, more just very public, outward facing, and not very granular information about the differences between DSS, basic, and charter. And so we got a couple of callouts that we'll put out here on some of the other slides. But a lot of this, some kind of important information, but maybe it's not as important. Maybe it's deceptively important. The PO data is going away from DSS as DSS is going away, and it's only going to be available in the charter and not the basic version of Luminate. But as you can see there that they've called out, it is available in Nova still in Retail Link, and Nova does not appear to be going away anytime soon. So again, what's best for your business? Is that something that will kind of, the way that you can look at that is like, we don't have the money for charter. We can't even consider that. I need to familiarize myself with Nova now for that PO information if you've been using DSS for that. Or if that's something that is kind of, you know, something that would encourage more engagement via charter. But yeah, same thing for OTIF there as well. The OTIF scorecard is basically where you can do all of that in Retail Link. But Charter has some kind of insight into that as well. Again, nebulous, not totally sure what that is. Another key call out is data history store level and ad hoc reports. Those are going to go back 2 years in Basic and DSS. And in Charter, they're going back 3 years. So that's planned for Q1 as well. So watch out for that. And then these net new data assets, the way that I'm thinking about this whole section is basically this is them just kind of more or less selling Charter, talking about what are the things that Charter will be adding that we haven't really seen in other places so much. So you've got online pickup and delivery, SQEP, which is of course also available in Retail Link, and then and then digital availability too. Preview data before report creation is another call out that they have for Charter. And then when it comes to report sharing, yeah, there are limitations around that for people who aren't doing Charter as well. So I want to talk about it though in this way, almost as like a workflow. The DSS features that will not be included in Luminate Basic, right? So these are the real hard selling points for Charter, or they're just kind of moving to other apps. So that PO information, it's always been available in Nova, so it's still going to remain available in Nova. And it'll be available through Luminate Charter as well. I want to say that one is also available in the in Supplier One. Supplier One has basically Nova capability duplicated in it as well. So if you guys are getting into Supplier One, it's there too. All of that PO information should be the same across all of those different platforms. But report sharing and bot access are two kind of call outs that DSS had featured and that won't be included in Luminate Basic. Now that's it's Walmart's language there. So all of that, you may have more specific questions to that can be better answered by Walmart than us, but still put them in the Q&A. We'd love to see those. Okay, so new features in Luminate Basic that weren't in DSS, right? So this is kind of the stuff that Walmart is trying to kind of like ease this transition. Here's the new kind of like help that Luminate, or the new insight that Luminate will offer that DSS didn't. Enhanced e-com sales visibility, so general omnichannel performance metrics, looking more at the whole of the performance as opposed to each of those separately or in different reports. And then email notifications on report completion is a perk, I guess, maybe. So new features in Luminate Charter that were not in DSS, and then I think that this includes a lot of stuff that is also not in Basic, especially these three bolded ones here at the bottom that you can see. So OTIF and PO, again, you can find those in other places. So it's not necessarily something that you'll need Charter for. But net new data assets, data preview before report creation, report sharing in custom attributes and groups, and then data feeds and APIs, right? So there's a lot of stuff there that, again, there's a certain level of insight to Luminate Charter that Walmart is putting out as their kind of like to try to get people to have interest in Charter as well. But these three here at the bottom, I think, are really the more kind of the harder selling points for Charter. Shopper behavior, insights, and customer perception. And again, these are very kind of like broad terms. So if Walmart is reaching out to you to talk about Charter, or if you are reaching out to Walmart to talk about Charter, presumably that conversation will look like demoing what these individual features are actually like as a way of kind of generating interest in Charter. And I just want to reiterate what Ali mentioned earlier. What Walmart is saying is that after the sunsetting of DSS, Luminate Charter will become more expensive. So yeah, just a bummer. So what is kind of going away in the transition from DSS to Luminate? Not much, I don't think. The biggest pain point is really going to be about the changing the actual report templates, or changing the names for report templates. The fact that the data will be different, or is likely to be different, is kind of daunting. At least could be really positive, could be not positive. And really, the main call out that I want to have is what everyone already knows already. It's just that it's going to be a big adjustment, and it's going to be painful. Starting that transition now while access to DSS is still available, and trying to duplicate those reports or find the equivalent of those reports in Luminate now, while you can still access all of those columns in the DSS reports, could be really great. Yeah, so I wanted to call that out there. And then, there is change is hard, and it's just going to suck for a long time. But I do want to call this out again, that this will probably have a lot of business insight benefits for both the suppliers and the Walmart side of things in the long run, right? And again, with any of these new developments from Walmart, it's reasonable to have a lot of suspicion and frustration for a lot of people who feel like they, maybe our business, we need to buy Charter in order to actually stay afloat, or in order to stay competitive, or whatever it is. And that's just a bummer. And there's no kind of positive spin on that. But it does appear that with Charter, there is a lot of performance visibility insight and customer behavior information that could be really valuable, again, not just to suppliers, but to the whole kind of business, the CPG business as a whole, right? If the Walmart business is a significant portion of that. So again, that is the positive spin, and there is reason to be somewhat optimistic about that difference in the reporting for Charter, but also for Basic. We see that emphasis, that integration showing up there as well. So Walmart is really kind of wanting to push that to the insight into shopper behavior. Their EDLP and their customer first kind of mantras are really guiding a lot of that language as well. And so with Charter, they'll be able to pull customers and to kind of build insights from that. That's a part, more of the language that they're using to kind of describe what some of those benefits are as well. So this is a question that we ask just to put it on everyone's radar. As obviously it's something that people should be considering. Whether this is kind of something that you would actually be involved with or not is a different story as well. And it's definitely something that just has to happen on a business to business basis. What is best for your Walmart business? What is what are the business decisions of that CPG kind of regarding their Walmart business, et cetera. So a few things to consider when thinking about this. Charter's costs are based off of retail sales, not sales to Walmart. So that's something that has been a point of frustration for some suppliers that we've seen who are having this conversation. So again, Charter is about pushing the customer's interaction with the CPG, the SKU itself, right? And so they're basing the cost off of retail sales is similar in that that's the kind of point of emphasis, right? It's about making the suppliers aware of the customer experience more. And so the cost of it and the charge is kind of based off of that too, right? So yeah, again, maybe that's just another kind of pill to swallow in the process. Maybe that's something that is actually better or more appealing to certain suppliers over others. All of that, again, is going to have to be kind of your own decision and your own kind of like, but something that definitely to consider in thinking about it. I know that some suppliers have felt that the investment is absolutely essential, and others have been completely dismissive of Charter from the very beginning and have expressed nothing but disinterest. So there's a full range of reactions in terms of that. So we can't give any kind of uh, reporting on across the board or across categories or whatever, whether it's a good decision or not, obviously. But we also know that Walmart, as I mentioned earlier, Walmart has been pitching charter to some suppliers, so probably depending on size and things like that. Um, uh, and those meetings may give insight into the ROI on charter, and they may not, right? So again, take all that with a grain of salt. But there are conversations that are happening, and presumably some of those features are being demoed. All right. We're 10 minutes from 12 o'clock. So I'm going to try to run through this tips and strategies. A lot of this is just super intuitive, but stay tuned for the next version, the next iteration of this webinar, where we'll do a lot more of this, a lot more just pulling reports in Luminate. What does that look like? Some of the most salients are vendor scorecard, obviously, data set overview and sample reports. Those are really big. If you go into Luminate, into the Learn page, or I think it's called the Knowledge Base is the actual name of the page, they'll have detailed instructions on how to do all this as well. Maybe just start there and take it kind of one step at a time, starting from square one there. But here's a little bit of what the actual dashboard looks like, what pulling these reports would actually look like. But you can start out in My Reports. You've got a new report feature right there. That's how they get started. And then they've got these templates kind of laid out a little bit for you there already. And again, some of these will be the same. Some of these will have new names. There will be a different point of emphasis. But if you go to reports, you can select the vendor scorecard there. This will obviously be super important for line reviews and all that. So on the far right-hand side are going to be the filters. And there is a search function in here. Calling this out now, I'm going to call it out again later. You can search for these filters based off of their DSS names. The DSS business element will be there, but it won't be the same on the actual, it might not be the same. It might not have the same business element name in Luminate itself. Okay, so I want to call that out again. It will be searchable, but it might not have the same Luminate name there. So that's how you can duplicate your reports, basically, is by being aware of all of the filters that you're using for a specific report in DSS, writing all those down, searching for them here, and then kind of building them out that way. Again, it might not be intuitive. It might not be, it's going to be a pain, but there's all that. So this is covered in our article as well. I'm going to kind of skim over this. A lot of you will know what these are for and how they work, but we like to cover some of the basics here too. So some notable filter levels for the vendor scorecard are vendor or vendor number, and another call out for Luminate is you no longer have the 9-digit vendor numbers that you can use to filter, right? But what they want you to do instead is to use the 6-digit vendor number and then filter by category. I think we may have that written down on one of these slides, but just in case we don't, I want to call that out here now as well. It sounds like this horrible kind of misfire, but it's just another step. There's just another step. You take the 6-digit vendor number across the whole thing, and then you filter by department. So you can filter by brand too, is another kind of subcategory there. By category, as I called out as well. So no more 9-digit shortcuts there. And then obviously by item, and you can get a lot more detailed from there as well in ways that we've already talked about in the DSS report building. So those are over there on the right-hand side. After you click run there, it'll take you to this create report page, this landing page. And then here's where you can, obviously naming these reports is going to be super important for internal or external use. Describing them as accurately as possible is important, but also a real challenge. It's a lot harder than it sounds sometimes. The description is optional, obviously. And then for the format, if you want to do an Excel format or a CSV, and then you've got your cadence. So how often are you wanting to run these reports? All of that you put in there before officially running it. And then we want to look at this from a kind of like a broader return to the DSS conversation scope as well. What are the actual differences in those reports? This is something I want to kind of turn back to the chat as well, because this is the best of my knowledge, but it might not be the best of all people's knowledge. So are there differences between the scorecard and Luminate and DSS? If there are, what is that communicating to us about Walmart's kind of vision for Luminate and for the future, et cetera? But for the most part, they should look the same. The only really notable difference being the addition of POS quantity data in Luminate. So let us know if there's something else that's kind of different there. Is there more of an omni-channel emphasis in the vendor scorecard as well? Or are all of the rows going to be pretty similar? All right, so there's that. I've already called this out already, but I really want to kind of do a big call out for this here. The attributes and business glossary. We're going to have more content coming out about this, what these aliases are. But that's going to be your home base for if you need to look at the difference between the names of these filters and or reports in Luminate as opposed to DSS. And they'll have two columns there. They'll have the Luminate business element, and then they'll have the DSS business element, and those will be compared. So you can kind of filter by that and look at all that. Again, the DSS filters are searchable in the reports themselves, even though the names are different. So it shouldn't be a major roadblock to building out those reports if you have that knowledge. But it might be, this is an essential glossary to have on hand, just kind of moving forward in that context. But we've got 5 minutes until noon. We're going to stay after that. So if you have to go somewhere after noon, then of course, yeah, our apologies for not being able to get to all of them in advance. But if you can afford to stay on to hear the other questions, we highly recommend that too. But let's go. Let's get into some of the questions.
All right, Peter, I'm going to go through a couple of these that I know that we talked about, but people are jumping on and off, so I want to make sure that we cover them. So Jacob asked, is there any way to transfer existing ports from DSS to Luminate? Peter, you already answered this, so I'll just cover it quickly. Yes, what we suggest now is look at your DSS reports, use those Luminate aliases. So when we say alias, that is what Luminate is calling the old name in DSS. So you can actually search those in Luminate and build your reports that way. It may not be apples to apples, and you may have to go in and kind of see, okay, it looks like I need this type of column to kind of supplement some of the things that are not coming over from DSS, but that's our best suggestion. So you can find that alias report, and we'll also have some content coming out, but you can find that on the Luminate help doc section. Another question that we asked is, will Luminate Basic have everything that DSS has? And that is no. So, Peter, I know you covered that, and everyone will get these slides, but Peter can always go back to those as well if you wanna review those. Jana asked, and she asked this in the chat as well, and I replied, can charter members reference the basic training? So we really recommend using the free resources and the ones from Walmart. There are resources out there where people are asking you to pay for things, and we haven't used those, so I don't know the actual value that they add, but the 3-hour training that Walmart does, I believe it's on a Friday. I think that's what was called out. Someone linked it in the chat. Go sign up for that. I think that has been the most helpful for understanding Luminate and getting your mind around it. So that's what I would call out. I'll shoot some questions towards you, Peter. For the format on Luminate, it's different than DSS. So what are any tips that you've heard that are helpful for building these reports and transferring them?
Yeah, so I think that with that, the only help I could really offer with that, the limited help that I could offer is just what I mentioned briefly about while we have DSS going through kind of like on a column by column basis, those column headers should exist as aliases in Luminate whenever you're building your own reports. So building them a little bit more manually, again, that might be really bad advice. So just take all that with a grain of salt. What might be better is going through the basic training and building the reports that they show you how to build in that, and then learning how to kind of intuit the best sort of reports you may need to be pulling in Luminate through that training. But I do know that all of those element names should still exist in the individual filters themselves. So if you wanted to go through and kind of build it from scratch, that's possible too. But yeah, I think what the question is asking is a different kind of version of like, we can't transfer these over to Illuminate in this like tidy way. And I think it's just a bummer. But yeah, if anyone has more kind of insight into that, definitely let us know.
I just saw Alexandria posted about a Walmart class. So the one that we're suggesting is the one that is through Walmart. I think Chris actually shared it first. I just recopied what he sent because that's what I was going to send as well. Use the Walmart Data Ventures. It's from Walmart. It's their class or whatever, and it's free. So that's the class I would use for building reports.
Yeah, and I'd like to call out also the knowledge base page in Luminate Basic again. Someone asked if the Luminate Basic training is available for charter. It should be. There should still be a knowledge base page available for anyone, and we highly recommend that. There's a lot of really kind of practical advice, I think, for getting started and for just getting your mindset into the right place with Luminate.
Exactly. Another question that was asked, and I don't know how much we'll be able to go into every single report that you can pull in DSS, but this one was submitted early. It's about the unpaid detail report. So we did some digging around, and it doesn't look like it's something that you can currently pull in Luminate. And I would search in the Luminate help docs or go to the live training of the video that we sent. And see if you can ask that question. But we kind of poked around in some of the other apps. My suggestion is if you can't find it in Luminate, go see if there's a webinar, sorry, a DSS or Retail Link rather. I'm getting my words mixed up. A Retail Link app that has that data. So it looks like for an unpaid detail report, and I'm reading my notes because I was kind of doing some digging. It's possible to use the invoice summary section in the APIS app. So that's the accounts payable inquiry system. And you can search by starting with the invoice and ending with the invoice number. So search for that. And you can see like invoice status and payment or the lack of a payment. It's not exportable and it has a limit on rows. So that's another kind of roadblock there that's unfortunate. But I would see if you can pull that information in APIS first. It looks like I'm just seeing through some of the other notes that I was taking. You can't just look for it under the unpaid invoices tab within DSS. So yeah, it looks like APIS is the only way you can pull it, but it's not as easy or intuitive. So unfortunately, that doesn't seem like something that's in Luminate that I've come across, but we're taking all of these questions and we're just going to apply them to this deck. And we'll also, take any questions we get sent in before or after this and apply it. So we'll kind of do some more research into the unpaid detail report, but try APIS first if you're looking for that content.
Yeah, I can also attest that the unpaid detail report there isn't anything about it in the glossary. So that's not really good news either. I think what that means is like, it's not something that they've changed. They haven't changed the name of that report and put it in Luminate. Yeah, for better or for worse.
Yeah. I just want to also kind of call out some other things. I'm filtering through these. We mentioned how if your merchant is asking for DSS reports, another fellow supplier just mentioned like respectfully reply to the buyer and share the Luminate data. As that's going to match what the buyers are going to be seeing on their flight deck or merch one. So I just wanted to like share that as well because that's coming in through the QA. Other questions, Peter? I'm not sure on this one, but with the bot access, if they have a third party pulling automatic weekly reports, does Luminate have anything at all? What's the status with third parties accessing Luminate?
Yeah, I don't know. My I my educated guess is that yeah, that can't happen anymore in Luminate Basic. But I don't know. I can't advise anything like with that either. My understanding of that bot access going away means exactly that. Like you've got basically just 1P people who can use it, who can access the information in Luminate. So yeah, that's just my understanding. I definitely would take that question as well to the Luminate basic training sessions because they'll give you a very probably a more kind of specific answer. But again, I would imagine it's going to be bad news.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure on that, but I'll defer to you, Peter. I'm reading through a couple more of these questions. Um, looks like Bill asked if you're a charter member, can you go back to basic? Have you heard of that, Peter? I haven't heard of anyone switching. I would assume they're probably gonna have you do a subscription and it's probably gonna be based month to month or by year. And so you're kind of locked in from there.
Yep, I don't have any extra insight into that too. I'd imagine it's contractual, and so
Yeah,
um,
that makes sense.
there would be a renewal period or something like that.
Yes. And then Nicole asked, and I think you answered this earlier. I'm filtering through some of the questions that have come in. Can they share reports to other Luminate members? I believe that's just a charter feature, correct?
Yeah, let's check it out because I think that there's um so report sharing in custom attributes and groups is a feature here that's listed as a charter benefit. But there was something else in Illuminate Basic. Maybe I was just thinking of email notifications and report completion and conflating it with that. I think that you're right, Ali, or that's my understanding of the outward facing most basic kind of explanation of what these differences are, is that that report sharing in custom attributes. Let's see, it'll be here somewhere. So report sharing in this section right here, I want to call this out because there are some sharing that can happen in basic. So the email notification on report completion, they're calling that as a kind of like a part of report sharing, I guess. But yeah, so that's available in basic and it wasn't in DSS. The multiple time selection, not sure exactly what they're talking about there, is available all the way across the board, but the custom attributes and groups, which sounds like more kind of what your question is about, that is only for charter.
Yep, that makes sense. Um, I'm prioritizing getting through these questions, but that's helpful, Peter. I did have someone ask about the accounting reports in DSS. From what I understand, those are not available. This is probably the one place where I will stop and say, like, SupplyPike has access to pulling information from different places in your retail link. And when it comes to like accounting and revenue loss, that's kind of our bread and butter. So I'm just sharing, this is the kind of one place I will do a like sales pitch basically, because it makes sense there. But obviously we want to prioritize the education. I don't see any accounting reports, and that's something that we've been looking at. So unless they update those and make those accessible, I don't see them coming through. But I would use for now APIS, APDP, and your accounting scorecard to kind of flesh out some of the pieces that may be missing there. All right. Peter, I think we have time for like maybe one more question.
Yeah.
And then the rest of these we're going to take and just see if we can find some information on them. Again, these are our emails. Please reach out to us or find us at supplypike.com. We'd love to help you. We know that this is a really frustrating process and we're just here to support suppliers. So please let us know what we can do to help. The last question that I'll ask Peter, Do you know where you could maybe find the 90 days paid detail report? It was a template on DSS. And do you know if any of that information will be in Nova or Supplier One? Um, I mean, I think we've kind of reiterated this, but I feel like finding the aliases will be the easiest way. And if it's not there, looking in Nova, if it is PO, if there's other reports, Peter, that I'm missing, or place apps that you can find that information, call that out.
My and I don't know this for sure, but the that report I would imagine is the same in Luminate. But yeah, it could have an alias as well. But I think that with the more common ones like the scorecard or the more kind of just like essential ones for reporting to Walmart, they're not going to want to change those names that much. So, but again, that's pure conjecture, and so yeah, it's a better question for the Luminate charter or the Luminate basic training session as well. But again, I want to reiterate what Allie's saying. We can find answers to all these questions. So if you have any lingering questions, or if you just want to kind of send it by us again with a little bit more kind of context or something, please email us. That's what we're here to do, is to kind of help with that whole process.
Yes. Thank you all for staying on. We've appreciated having you on, and then we hope to see you at another webinar. Take care.